Hey y'all, this is Neon. I'm doing a little video slash podcast today because I haven't really had a chance to talk very much about the spoilers. I've been a little bit too busy to be podcasting as of late, and it just really feels like there's been the spoilers been coming so quickly that I haven't even really tried to keep up with them in any other venue, really. So basically, I kind of decided that I would just do this a little bit of a video to kind of cover some of my thoughts on the cards right now, and it's also like going to be doing this in podcast form as well. So I'm going to be narrating like really what the cards are. But it'll probably be a shorter for a podcast, and like, I don't know, 20-30 minutes I would expect. I'm not actually sure. We'll see at the end how long it ends up being, but I'm going to share my thoughts on a bunch of the cards that are coming out, of course, for Eternal's Dark Frontier expansion that is just coming out tomorrow as a recording this. So hopefully I'll be having this out this afternoon so that you guys, or maybe even tomorrow morning, so that you guys can listen to this and watch this before the set actually goes live. But I'm going to start off by talking about some of the cards that I think are like the most obvious, and then kind of move into talking some of the more exotic and more interesting cards that are broader and more difficult to evaluate in various ways. The one that I want to start out with, though, is Ice Bolt. This is a 2-cost primal spell that deals 7 damage to a unit, and its owner plays a sigil of their choice from their deck depleted. And it's a fast spell. Now, this is a, for those of you who aren't aware of this, for some reason, this card is insane. This card is really, really good. Now, it does have limitations. There are some ways in which it's not perfect. I ran a poll on Twitter the other day, like when this was first released, about people's thoughts on where this stacked up in terms of other removal spells in the game. A lot of people felt that Desecrate was still better than this. I'm not certain about that. I still think that Equivocate is very likely better than this. We're gonna have to play with it, but like the depleted sigils that your opponent gets will power them up in the early to mid game, but that obviously doesn't matter in the late game. Now, 7 also isn't just like Path to Exile, which is a card from Magic the Gathering that people might recognize. So there has other differences to Path to Exile too, which I think are important to highlight. And I'll get to that. In terms of the evaluation, like, you can get stuff to outside of 7 health, and like that happens like not too infrequently, especially if you have like an obelisk that's in play or something along these lines. So it's not everything. In that respect, it's not like a hard removal spell, but like 95% of the time, maybe even more than that, it should do the trick in that respect. Now, like, ramping your opponent up will matter, especially in certain situations, but if you can weather that, I think this is could very often be a 4 of in a lot of Primal decks, or at least, you know, multiple copies of this in most Primal decks. So that's one. Now, the other thing to mention, of course, is why this is different than Path to Exile 2 is the fact that it doesn't exile cards. We don't have an exile effect technically in the game, but there's variations on it. Like, we have like things like Voidbound or whatever, and that does matter. Like, you'll see some cards even in this set here that you're going to want to have some effects like that. That's a harder, you know, removal spell, and this just does not qualify. So you'll be disappointed sometimes there. But for the most part, the card is quite good. It also costs more than Path to Exile. It's a lot worse than Path to Exile. So people don't complain. Comparing it to that might be a little bit over excited. Still really good, though. Another card that I wanted to highlight that's just kind of like a really solid, obviously good card that just came out today, actually, is the Embargo Officer. It says, is a 1-cost 2/1 for Justice Influence, and it says cards can't leave markets or voids. It has Shift 2. Now, Shift is a mechanic. I'm going to talk a little bit more about it later on. The reason I wanted to include this one is that this is a highlight, you know, a really interesting card that I think is just kind of a really standard, like very, very likely to see play. The big issue is 1-drop heavy aggro decks have really been struggling for a while. Now this might be kind of a reason to bring them back. One of the big reasons that they've sucked so much is that they are so vulnerable to basically any market hate. Like, if you have any card in your entire market that actually deals with them effectively, like the Rock Slides, or we had that Torrential Downpour was another one. Like, these are cards that don't require very much investment in terms of deck building, and then like totally smash 1-drop heavy aggro decks. So the fact that this at least protects itself in a certain way is interesting. Also, the fact that you have that shift 2 ability is really neat, because you can do things like play it out in the shift form to protect your other units from a spot removal spell that they would be getting from their market, or from a sweeper that they'd be getting from the market. Like if your opponent is playing a Justice deck that only has Harsh Rule in the market, this protects them from even getting that card from the market. It's worth noting that it hits you as well, that you can't get cards from your own market, and that is definitely a cost, and because most decks, even if they're aggressive decks, play markets, but you are going to care about it the least, I think, compared to especially these, for instance, 3 faction control decks that are playing powerful sweepers. So I really think that this is a very interesting card. It's a really interesting design, and I hope that it deals with some of the issues that we've been seeing of why aggro hasn't been doing so hot, other than I guess we've seen a little bit of a turning the corner on that recently because of the fire aggro decks that came back, especially in this most recent ECQ. But even those ones have a very different angle, a different flavor to them compared to 1-drop heavy aggro decks that we've, for instance, seen in the past. So this is, at the very least, I'm not exactly certain, I would say this is going to see play. It has a really good chance of seeing significant play, but it is a really neat design, at least. So I'm really happy to see this, and I'm looking forward to seeing where it goes from here. There's another cycle of cards that I think are also really interesting that I wanted to talk about as well. This is the 5-cost warp cycle. I did talk about one of these cards previously in the when I was talking about Sabu or something like this. The Radiant, the 5-cost 5/5 shadow card that had Death Touch and Warp, of course. And, Death Touch, is it Death Touch? Even Deadly, right? So I'm confused with Magic the Gathering. Even though I haven't played that in years and years, but Siditi is the one that we have up here. This is a 5-cost, 5 Justice Influence flying warp unit. It has Onslaught, play a Curse of Provocation on the enemy player. And the Curse of Provocation, of course, is a 5-cost shadow Justice relic at the cursed relic at the end of the cursed player's turn. If you didn't take damage, draw a card. This parlance and this verbiage for this one is a little bit awkward. So basically what it means is that if your opponent doesn't hurt you during their turn, then you draw a card. So you can easily draw a card every turn against a controlling deck, for example. So, really good punish for controlling decks. But this is a card that we wanted to draw this out as an example of this cycle. They seem really powerful. This is a really interesting card. It has multiple ways that you can get card advantage for a card like this. It's worth noting that these warp cards, I think, are pretty intentionally designed to punish, to not reward markets. They don't go in markets well. That's one of the things about warp, is that it doesn't work well in a market because you can't get that playing it off the top effect. It's part of the reason why you never see Heart of the Vault in a market, even when it's absolutely fucking insane. You want to maximize the chances that you're able to warp it off the top of the deck. The fact that this is such brutal influence requirements, though, is something that I really don't know how I feel about it. I've played Jotun Feastcaller, which has pretty brutal influence requirements, but there's actually a pretty big difference between 3 and 4, 3, 4 and 5, right? You with 4 or 3, you can do it with a little bit of effort, but I feel like for 5, you really need to put the work in. You think, for instance, of Champion of Cunning. This is a card where people it's a really, really powerful card, but basically doesn't see play outside of 2 faction Felon decks, right? So, and even then, you often don't get to play it on turn 5. So the fact that this is a war card that is going to be a little bit harder to play out on time is definitely a weird wrinkle in this whole cycle. It makes it really hard to evaluate because I just don't know what it feels like to be playing with a 5 influence card in that you require in order to just get them out onto the battlefield. Especially, I don't think that this goes exactly in a control deck or any of these cards. You want to be at least kind of mid-rangey, I feel. So something different than the Champion of Cunning, for example. So not being able to curve out with this very consistently is a concern. I don't know. This is a lot of ranting thoughts and kind of wandering thoughts on this. I just don't know how I feel, but because it seems powerful, a lot of them seem powerful. I'm going to be talking about this in the other members of this cycle too over the course of this video. They're super interesting. Definitely though, the influence requirements, the fact that we're getting some better power in the game is going to be part of that story too. So we're going to talk about those quickly too. We have the insignia here. For those of you who are listening at home, I am sipping some coffee as I'm going through this. So we have the insignia here. This is a cycle of power that we have as the Praxis, Cambrai, Hooru, Felm, and Stonescar versions of this, and you gain 2 influence when you play the power, and it becomes depleted if you have any cards of other factions in your deck. So basically it means that if you're a mono Praxis deck, mono Cambrai deck, mono Hooru deck, mono Stonescar deck, or mono Felm deck, you get rewarded because you get a 2 faction power that works all the time undepleted, which is amazing. In case you guys didn't realize it's something that this is a really big deal in terms of changing and altering the power level of these different factions. Now there are some people who have been kind of going off about how they don't like the factions being controlled by the power level of their power. And just find it awkward. And going back to, for instance, for the example of back when we had crests for only 6 out of the 10 factions. I get it. I have to say that I'm not super big fan of it. The fact that this particular power, though, I feel like it really encourages a particular style of gameplay. It has much more in the way of deck building constraints. I think that crests are just kind of just generically good. They go into a lot of different decks. You can play it in 2 faction, 3 faction, etc. Mid-range / aggressive decks to very controlling decks. It goes a lot of different places. So it wasn't a really big deck building consideration. It just kind of arbitrarily made them into something different. I feel like these really reward certain playstyles. It really is quite good for aggressive decks, particularly that's focused on just 2 factions. So I feel it actually does a lot to reward a given style of play that will differentiate things a little bit, as opposed to just kind of this arbitrary thing where some people get them and some people don't. So I like them, I think, as a design. Maybe I will find it just too oppressive that all we're seeing are Praxis, Cambrai, Hooru, Stonescar, and Felm decks over the next little while. But I'm not opposed to seeing a little bit more Cambrai, a little bit more Felm, for instance. Recently, they were good friends of mine back in the day, back in set 1, and haven't been seeing too much competitive success recently. So happy to see them back into the fold and getting some support in this form. This, of course, then goes into talking about the merchants, which was spoiled in that same article. This series of smugglers, I'm going to just read through each of them quickly for people who don't know them and people who are listening at home. So there's the, of course, once again, the same set of factions. So Praxis 1, East Annex Smuggler. It is a charge unit, and you may choose a card from your hand or to swap with a fire or time card from your market. So it's basically just a charge one. So we'll leave the black market thing. You guys all know what that text means. But I'll just read the other ability. So yeah, 2/3 charge for the Praxis one. Pearl Abbey is the Cambrai one. This is a 2/1, and when you play a spell, Pearl Abbey Smuggler gets +1/+1. Rhyme Conclave Smuggler is the Hooru one. Onslaught, you and Rhyme Conclave Smuggler each get Aegis. For the Felm Smuggler, we have a 1/4 with Berserk, and for the Stone Scar one, we have a 3/2 with Shift 3. So this whole cycle, I thought initially when I saw these, like, you know what, these are probably a little bit toned down from the smugglers that we got first time. Like the first batch of smugglers that we got, especially first out of the gate, seemed absolutely bonkers good. Like they were absurd. Like they did unbelievable. Like there's 2 of them that were nerfed twice. That's just never happened before. There's never been a card that's been nerfed twice since release, like after 3 months. Like holy shit. So yeah, there was a pretty high barrier to overcome, of course, and this didn't seem to be quite at that level. I don't think it's that much lower than that, though. Like it's a little bit lower. Like, so I still think that there's a pretty good chance that these ones get nerfed eventually. Like they're really good. Like when for example, the Pearl Abbey Smuggler. This is the Combre one. When I first read it, I thought that it just got the +1/+1 until end of turn. It's actually permanent. That's really, really good. It's so good, especially when you have shift. Oh my god, you can like shift it out, and then you like have a couple of turns of developing the size of it, and then it comes into play, and you can have stand together ready already, grab stand together for you. Like, oh my god, right? You know, these cards are really good. I mean, so Rime Conclave Smuggler is the one that sticks out to me as being kind of mediocre. It's pretty narrow in where it can go into. Like, I mean, if you are in a relatively aggressive Hooru, and that's the Hooru one, of course, 3/2, Onslaught, you and Rime Conclave Smuggler each get Aegis. Like, if you are an aggressive deck, this is basically old Genève Merchant. But, like, that's also not absurd. And you still have to, and like part of the advantage of old Genève Smuggler is you can just play it out, find some aggressive tool to pair with it, and then, you know, get to work. And so the fact that you need to pair this with another unit that's attacking is definitely a downside. This is the one that I would point to that I feel is a little bit lackluster. East Annex Smuggler, this is the Praxis one. Oh my god, this one is really good in my mind, especially when you are putting it into something like the Praxis Pledge decks that are around right now. It just fits in there just like so naturally. I mean, I know that they like the ramp from the Aurelian Merchants, but this is a really powerful card because you can also use it to like deal its damage immediately. Your market already doesn't have very many cards that are already in your deck, with the exception of the Glasshopper, which is it's an important card. But so like this, that's something that you can do. Have an extra charge threat. It's really good against sites, particularly. This bops the tomb really well, so that I think is a powerful tool, particularly for something like Genève. Like that's something that you would get for them. And Genève right now, like they've clearly had their market and their merchants sort of targeted in these various ways. I think that they've had both of all 3 of the original merchants that they had access to have all been nerfed. So Time, with the Aurelian, the Genève, and the Ixtan ones, and then they just of course had the Great Valley Smuggler also nerfed for them. So they've had that hit again and again and again and again. And the fact that East Annex Smuggler and also pulls fire cards from the market too, so really good with show as well. So all together, this card is amazing. I don't know, man. And then the film one, you can't see it here if you're watching the video. I just took the screenshot, but yeah, trust me, it is a 1/4 Berserk. That by itself is not particularly exciting, but you pair this with basically anything, and it suddenly becomes unreal. Like, I think that people have been talking about the 3/1 life stealing weapon. I can't remember the name of it now, but that one. So you can have a 4/4 or 4/5 life-stealing berserk unit on turn 4 that you grab that from the market. Like, you just have all these tools that you could grab from the market, and suddenly this card is insane. It does something really busted. It is amazing with Rapid Shot, which once again you can pull from the market if that's what you want. So definitely rewards aggressive play style. I guess, like, also just 1/4 stats. I honestly just think that 1/4 stats for 3 on a market body, like, it could just have no other text, and that's really interesting because it just blocks so well. So if you're playing this in a defensive deck, in a controlling deck, it does keep away the riffraff and buy you a bunch of life. Your opponent's usually going to have to play a card in order to actually battle past it. And then finally, the Stone Scar 1 shift is hard to evaluate on a card like this, in my mind. I think I'll say this a lot, is that I just really have to play with shift, get used to shift, and see how it plays in order to really, like, know for sure, like, how I feel about it and where it ranks in the terms of the power level. This seems like a really good card, though, to me, and I would not be shocked for this to see a ton of play in the decks that can cast it. And we're just gonna have to make a lot of more decisions now about market composition, merchant selection, etc. Like, it's all, as always, it's going to be one of the hardest parts about deck building in the last couple of months, and it'll continue on to the future. But these are really, really powerful cards, and it'll shock none of you, I'm sure, that they're going to say a ton of play. Going back to the shift, though, like, we have cards like this. So the one that we have right now is Phase Out. This is a 1-cost time spell. Choose a unit and shift it. So, of course, this means that they would be out of commission in terms of attacking and blocking for 3 turns. The fact that you can use this on both your stuff and your opponent's stuff, and it costs only 1. This card could be broken. I would not be surprised to find out a few months from now that this card is busted. This has a really wide range of different applications that you can do. So there are 2 of the ones that are just, like, really basic. One, it is, use this on a card like Alessi. You phase her out. She has this passive where she grows, and then she comes back as, like, a 5/5 Aegis unit. And you can just do that without very much effort. And you can very easily pair the 2 of them just on turn 2. So turn 2, play those, you just do regular shit for a couple of turns, and then before she comes out, you just use the, like, a stand together, and she comes back with Aegis. Like, that's so good, and it's going to be really hard for your opponent. Or you have the Staff of Unity set up so that on your turn, you Staff of Unity, you attack, and unless your opponent has very particular types of fast speed interaction, you win immediately. So that's wild. Like I just feel like that's a really powerful application. And the fact that you can use this then on your opponent's shit. Your opponent, like, let's say you're playing this Combre aggro-ish deck that you have, and then you're playing up against a opponent that has something like a Baby Vara in play. You just phase her out, and you get to attack for free, and she's, like, functionally stunned for, like, 5 turns. Or what feels like 5 turns, what am I saying? 3 turns. Definitely 3 turns. But it also has this interesting, like, application where then it means that also if your opponent does have harsh rule, just bump my microphone, guys, sorry. If your opponent does have a harsh rule, that they're also going to be killing their own shit too. But they're put into this, like, weird bind if you're phasing out your opponent's stuff or shifting your opponent's stuff. This card is just has tons and tons of little potential like this, and I am so here to try it out. I would not be, as I said, would not be shocked if this is a 4 of constructed staple in some decks. I would not be shocked to see if this getting nerfed in the future. These are all, like, really like, bold predictions. That I know that these are hot takes. I'm not saying that this, like, for sure. I still have to play with the mechanic. I have to get a feel better for how it works operationally. That's something that's a pretty big thing of mine, is that I really want to play with mechanics first before really getting a hard take on precisely how I think of them, because there's so many of them that really just require some familiarity with them. But then the next one that also falls into this is the Rost, the Walking Glacier. This is the 7/7 for the 5 cost and 5 Primal Influence, and has Overwhelm and Warp, and has Entomb, Play, Rost, Shifted. So this means that he'll die, he goes back to the battlefield, he is a shifted unit now, so he comes back then after a couple turns. So you can kill him for 3 turns at a time. Like, you can't even kill him while he's is shifted, I believe. Like, if he is shifted after you killed him, and then you killed him again through like another harsh rule, he would just come back shifted again, I believe. That would have to be like confirmed though. I'll have to play with it. There's the mechanics around shift are ones that I really have to get comfortable with. But yeah, he is a really spooky card. This is one of the reasons why Iced Bolt is not Path to Exile. This seems like a kind of card that could see play, assuming that these are the 5 influence cycle sees any play. Like, this has got to be one of them. She's played it absolutely dumpsters control. 7/7 is also really big. Excuse me. It also is the dumpsters control. The fact that it's 7/7 also is really good against Praxis 2. This is a long running joke that Praxis just can't beat 7/7s or bigger, and this is a 7/7, so that matters. I'm interested to see how this plays out for sure. This is a fascinating card. I'll once again have to get some feeling for it. Works really well if you're copying it too. Like, if you got one in play and then copying it for other things, it's going to be. And for instance, he comes into play from being shifted, and then you immediately place something like Mirror Image on it. Now you have 2 of them. It's going to be so hard to get these off of the battlefield, and I really like that, and I find that exciting, and it's going to really reward different kinds of interaction. So I'm interested to see how this actually plays out. Seems powerful, though. There's a few other cards that are kind of miscellaneous ones that I think that are interesting. Kira is one that I did touch on in my a Western Western movie review or story review that I did this time as a joke, of course. Like, that was a fun one. You can find a link to that in the description and in the comments as well. A lot of fun to do that one. But this is a card that I'm really happy that Yodabite made it, because it's one, I feel like everybody has kind of thought about this ability on a card at some point in the past. There's the idea of like, hey, what if we do our giant growth on our units, but it just didn't go away? What if it just stayed forever? And it's something that I think we've all thought about sort of in passing, but the fact that he actually decided yes, we're going to put this on a card and make it a real part of the game, I thought was really cute and fun, and I think this is a really sweet package. And the fact that Direwolf Digital even leveled up a power level compared to what he suggested, I think that the version that he had was a 2/2 for 3. And I saw that, I was like, oh, that's an interesting idea. I don't think that'll see competitive play if they make that. But it's a cute, interesting card, and maybe you play it in some janky Scream decks. This card here, though, this one I actually think has some very real potential. Just Finest Hours, or I don't know, whatever, man. You can do lots and lots of shit with this. Rapid Shot. It's really trivial to turn this into an absolute monster within just a couple of turns, and it will just kill people. It does depend on the rest of the deck kind of coming together in order to make this viable, because she can't kind of hold up the deck all by herself. But there's a lot of other components there that I think are really exciting and interesting. So it works really, really well with Commando as well. That's one that is spooky as shit, because once she gets 2 combat abilities, then she's getting +1/+1/+1 all the way, and all those combat abilities are man, there's lots you can do with this. And I could be misreading it. It could be just the 2/2s for 2 basically need to have something unreal as their decks in order for it to be playable. But Jesus Christ, this is a really good card. When it's at its best. There's some other cards though that are I think are interesting, and I'm not sure where they land. There's a whole cycle of these cards that are legendary spells that generate another card, and they really interest me because like a lot of them have much less of the power level is in the first half. Let's put it that way. The first half is a little bit lower impact, but generating another card that is really good, and that you then leads to a question of like, okay, so where does that make it playable? And like, is it just too much work? Is it too much power investment? And I don't know. I think the Loyal have gone really hard to write off cards like this one is Innate Conviction. This is obviously the one I'm going to share because it was one that was, of course, spoiled on a+space games. Thank you very much to Ghetto Bioland / Matt / Hooru's follower for doing that on the website. And I think that he did a really nice article there. Once again, that'll be in the description, in the comments. You can find that. I'll link to that if you didn't see it. But like, I honestly think that a card of this nature is interesting because cards like Hurler have been so good because you get another card that you can do something with. This isn't the same. It does different stuff, and that's a weakness, but it's still really powerful potentially, and if you have all of the power to use it properly, or if you had cost reducers for warp cards or spells in general. So I think that this is a long shot to this particular one, the Innate Conviction. I should just like read this card for it. I don't even know if I read Kira for it, which is unfortunate because I think it's a really sweet card. I'm going to do that really quickly. So Kira, that is 2/2 for 2 with Justice Influence. When Kira gets attack, health, or battle skills for the turn, she keeps them. So that's just one for anybody who didn't remember that one. That's the card I was talking about just before for the folks from the podcast. But yeah, Innate Conviction. This is a 4-cost, a double Primal Influence warp card, and it deals 3 damage and has Onslaught. Create and draw a 3/4 Arc Dragon, and then the Arc Dragon is a 3/4 for 4-cost, double Primal Influence, Flying, Berserk, Overwhelm, and your spells deal +1 damage. Like this, like Arc Dragon is fucked up good. Like really, really powerful. Like if this was just a card that was in the game, I'm almost positive it would see very serious constructed play. The Innate Conviction, if it didn't generate that dragon, it would see absolutely no play. The whole package is really clunky and really expensive. But I don't know, man. I have a feeling that people are underestimating the power of generating these extra cards and what you can maybe do with that and using these different resources. It's a long shot. Don't get me wrong. I don't think that this is definitely not something that I would be crafting on day one to build around. But it's worth trying these out and thinking about them more carefully because it's a different mechanic than I think people might be really processing it and thinking about it as. Now, there are a bunch of other cards, though, that kind of fall into this category of niche, interesting, possibly good, possibly garbage spells that I am interested in looking into myself. Another one that I am really fascinated in, this is one that I have to admit I have a soft spot for, is Dizzo's Racket. 4-cost, double Shadow Influence, relic. When you gain armor, draw that many cards and take twice that much damage. This card can draw you so many cards. I love drawing cards. Drawing cards is great. The problem is you kill yourself in the process a little bit. There's just like lots going on with this one that I think are really neat and are actually worth investigating. Like this with Alessi is really good because she's constantly drawing you stuff. Like you can do, if you're for instance using Alessi with shift with this like phase out with that, like so for example, we'll play Jesus Racket on turn 4. Turn 5 you play Alessi and then you phase her out immediately, you draw a card, you take damage. Now you can just like play anything, like I don't know, Seek Power. Now you take a damage, draw another card, and you can just do this for several turns in a row. And it's just like if you are able to develop an engine with this, I feel I'm also thinking about cards. Even like, I know this is janky. Water of Life, like Water of Life with this and Alessi. Like, that's really powerful. You gain 4 life, draw 2 cards for the cost of 2. Like, that's so good. Another one is Auric Runehammer. Like, that is a really powerful combo because you draw a card and you don't take a damage for it, and you're able to kill shit. It just does all sorts of really neat stuff, and it acts as a card draw engine. It's so clunky, and it has all this potential to go horribly wrong. I get that element of it. There's definitely some shit going on there for it that it has me concerned, but I love it. Gotta say, I love it, and I hope that I am that somebody cracks it. This does tie into another one of this cycle of you play it and then generate another card. Is Righteous Intent. This is a 3-cost double justice spell. Gain 3 armor, create and draw a 0/6 Kazefa Trueheart. This is a spell, of course. And then the Kazefa Trueheart is a 5-cost double justice influence lifesteal unit with attack equal to your armor, and when you gain health, you gain that much armor. So if you did some bullshit with the Racket, you could get some action going here with her as well. Like, obviously, it doesn't really help your potential that much for killing yourself, because I guess when you're doing something like you have Kazefa in play, you play a something like the Water of Life, you would take no damage functionally because you gain 3 armor and you gain 3 life, and then you take 6 damage, but then you draw 3 cards for each copy. So that actually sounds busted. To me, that sounds insane. Man, God, I want this to be good. I don't think that it is. I think that there's gonna be some problems here, but God, I want it to be good. It could be. Yeah, draw 3 cards, Ancestral Recall. I don't know, guys. I don't know. Okay, we'll have to see. There are just there's just all this sort of weird, crazy, nutty combo enabling bullshit that's just in the game on purpose. I don't know, it's wild to me. But Reread is another one that sort of falls into this category, that this is a 2-cost spell, Primal Influence, draw a spell from your void, it gains Void Bound. This really does enable some cookie combo shit. I don't know what it is yet, but this feels to me like it goes well into a combo shell, and there's different ways to maybe enable this to do even more. There's just more cards that just feel like they fit into a Storm type deck. For those of you who didn't play MTG, Storm deck is a deck that it was originally functioned around the Storm mechanic, and it still does to a certain degree, but it doesn't necessarily have to. But it would play a ton of spells, a ton of mana-generating spells, a ton of card draw spells, all in one turn, and then kill your opponent sort of all at once. So it was a really standard combo deck in that respect, but the biggest thing that it would do is it just is able to find ways to generate mana, recycle cards, etc. So this is one that would fit into something along those lines, where you can do something like play Kindle, or you play let's say you play End of the Barrel. End of the Barrel for the 10 power, and then you reread on you End of the Barrel again. So that all in all, that costs, it generated 20 power and costs 14, so you generate 6 in addition. So you would end up, you start with go on that turn with 12 power, and you could do a lot of bullshit shit for 12 power. So that's all part of it. And Glimpse the Possibilities is a card that also fits into that idea that I've been kind of talking about here, where if you were part of this is the 2-cost spell. The cards in your deck have Warp this turn. If you are generating a ton of power, then it would be really sweet to then just have infinite card draw functionally, and this kind of works like that. Obviously, you can run into power clumps, and that does cause some problems, but there might be some ways to avoid that too. For instance, there's Tillier Sanctum. It's not part of the presentation for this time, the video for this time, but that's a card that allows you to play multiple power per turn. Like, that seems like a good way to clear out power clumps as well. So, like, just Jesus, and then finally, like, the last one that kind of goes into this shell, and I think that there's got to be something here that's busted, is the Bren Ark Magister. This is a 7-cost double fire spell, and when you play another card, you get +1 power this turn. I mean, it just feels as if there's got to be some way to break this. You play this with the phase out effects. It's just going to do something. But if you keep it in play in any, by any means, and I'm just really excited to see kind of how that ends up working. This is a really powerful card, and there's got to be some way to win the game with this in terms of like where it would stack up as a power level of a deck / strategy. Hard to tell. It's going to require a lot of really hard work and actually grinding out how these strategies will function. But man, there's a lot of potential there, and if you guys are just kind of discounting it as being interesting and powerful, then I just like you might be really surprised. I mean, like, it could be totally wrong. This is one of those ones that anybody who's saying like this is definitely going to be a tier 1 strategy, like you're insane too. But if you're saying that there's no chance of it, then you're insane as well. Like, everybody's insane. It's the important part. This is another card that caught my attention for combo-ish potential. This is Death Pit. This is a 3-cost relic, double time influence, and it says all units have charge. You should note that is symmetrical, so your opponent's stuff has charge as well. The reason that this one is interesting to me is that this does enable some combo bullshit as well. We have things like the Storm deck previously that I did a video with, I think, at some point. I did do a video with that, and this should be linked below as well. But that was a lot of fun, and it's a really interesting strategy, and this would help enable something like this. This could also go into a Grinva Talir style deck. Not a Grinva. You wouldn't need Grinva anymore, actually, with a deck like this, a card like this. So I don't know. This is a powerful ability, powerful line of text. All units have charge, so we gotta see how that ends up playing out in the actual games. This will require some serious testing, though. Could be a total dud, but it could enable something busted. And yeah, so Godon as well goes into that same thing. This is what I'm saying. Like, there's a bunch of shit we could go into these decks and these strategies. Godon Undefeated is a 5-cost 5 fire influence card. It has charge, warp. This is, of course, that member of the cycle, and it says your other units have warp. It's really powerful. It's really, really powerful if you can keep her in play or if you can protect her. And I don't know. There's just a lot to be interested in, at least in a combo deck. Like, it feels like you could do a straight Praxis build as well, which would mean that you get to use the insignia, which will help with your influence requirements, which are obviously really steep if you are playing Godon. But so you could just do it as a Godon. Just Praxis, Bren, Storm. You have access to things like the Cell would be really, really good here. End of the barrel as well, and then you find some way to just generate a ton of power and then play a bunch of your deck. So I don't know whether that's actually going to be good or competitive, or how it will stack up. It'll at the very least create some really sweet moments. I think there'll be some fun games play with this style of deck, and we just have to figure out where it ranks in terms of power level. Could be busted, could be just high tier jank is a good way to put it. There's a few other cards, though, I want to address that people have been talking about in varying ways, and I think that are worth mentioning in one way or another. This is Null Blade that I have up on the screen right now. 4-cost, 3 Shadow Influence, 5/3 relic weapon. When a unit or weapon goes to the enemy void, it gets -5/-5. And then it has summon. Each unit and weapon in the enemy void gets -5/-5. This is definitely a interesting hate tool for any void-based strategies. The fact that Steward of the Past sucks so badly right now means that this should kind of replace him in most situations. I think this is just a much better card, and for the most part, the triple shadow. There's a few things to mention, I guess though. Well, comparing to something like Greatsword has been seen some market play. It's very rarely been main decked. It's kind of just fine, right? It's not insane like this, and having it being a 5/3 is not that much better than being a 5/2. I think that I would say that you start getting into a difference when you're talking about 5/4, because it now avoids Torch. There's a bunch of X3 units out there, so that break point seems like it matters a lot more to me than the difference between 2 and 3. It's just very hard to find, for instance, a 2 attack unit that you're going to attack with Null Blade and then attack something else. Again, like there's a couple out there, but not a lot. I guess mainly it would be merchants. But this seems like it would be a fine addition to some markets, especially if there are certain varieties of void-based combo decks / synergy decks that make a comeback. Like this would be particularly good against Haunted Highway, which has been like doing okay. Like it's still around on ladder, not insane, not anywhere near its peak anymore, because the power level of the whole game has been climbing really rapidly, and I don't think that that's going to change here. But like this. So, but just the triple shadow influence, the fact that it's not great in terms of just raw rate, like it seems okay to me, and it definitely will be good at handling very specific problems. But as a result, I would then rate this as maybe a 1 of inclusion in a Rise to the Challenge deck or a 1 of inclusion in a market / black market, but it's very unlikely to be a staple in the metagame, especially in the main deck, unless things go in a very weird direction compared to where I'm expecting. Just the quote unquote the hate aspect of this card is just not that good against a random deck. Like you're not going to, if you're playing against Praxis, that just doesn't matter. Like you just have a 5/3 weapon. If you're playing against like Hooru, it doesn't matter. You just have a 5/3 weapon, and like obviously it's like okay against those decks, but it's not good. Like if you're hitting something like a Sickles with this, like you take like you trade 1 for 1, they've already hit you for 5, and then you take an additional 2 damage for your work. Like it's not spectacular. So it's like ultimately, yeah, it's a playable card, especially in the market to handle specific problems. But if you think this is some sort of especially against like Reanimator, this is just not a great answer to Reanimator, because they can go off on you really really quickly with just a couple of like the Sport Folk. The fact that Vara is a 6/6 makes this much worse. Like I would obviously rather have this in my deck than not have this in my deck against Reanimator, but it's not a solution to something like that. So there's a lot of ways that this is not a super amazing hate card. It is just like an okay one. If Mokto somehow comes back and is insane, then you got something here, but that's like, I don't see that happening. We'll talk a little bit about the twist cards. This is one that is a mechanic that is a little bit bizarre to me. I don't know how I feel about it yet. I do kind of know how I feel about it. What I would say first is it really feels like a mechanic that has been pushed for draft and limited. It does not feel to me like it is. I've seen very many cards that look appealing for constructed applications. There are weird combo-y things. I think the Tuckus is one of the few that I think is kind of neat. For those of you who, by the way, just don't recall for whatever reason, Twist is a activated ability that you can activate a number of times on your units, and that it gives them +1/-1, and it also adds something to, like it does some effect beyond that as well. For the ones we've seen so far, there's probably some common that has just twist on it, but all the ones that we've seen have had some extra ability. The one that I'm showing on the board right now, the screen right now, is Stained Horror. This is the 1/3 Shadow Influence. Your twist abilities cost 1 less to use. I mean, maybe there's just some really cool combo pieces, a really cool combo deck that does it and makes it really interesting. I don't really see a whole lot of it. Tukas, as I said, the only one of the few that has really stuck out to me as being just like obviously like really pushed. It just doesn't seem like a mechanic though, like fundamentally that is going to be interesting for constructed, because you just want to play out impactful things and you're just getting these minor value. Like if the base rate of the card that you're getting is just good, like you just have a solid body. Like let's say you have Sandstorm Titan, and then you just add a twist ability of 3 and gain 1 life. Like you're still gonna just play Titan, right? So I guess that's part of it too. It's just important to remember that the twist abilities, like if I read, sometimes it's easy to read the twist ability and say, I don't think this is a good deal of getting the twist ability, but it's then easy to forget the rest of the card because you're kind of focusing on like, oh, this twist ability is bad. And if you think about things that way, and it's actually a little bit of a problem because you are sort of losing sight of really how the card operates. So the one that sticks out to me in this way is actually just the Minotaur Plate Maker. This is a 2/5 double Justice Influence 4-cost Minotaur, and it has double damage. And it has the twist, of course, pay 2 and twist Minotaur Plate Maker to play a +2/+2 weapon on one of your other units that isn't wielding a weapon. The way this is templated, it seems as if it's probably possible to play this without another unit in play without a weapon, so that at least that you have that. But like this is, if you just kind of read this at its base, I mean, yes, I'm not really attracted to that twist ability per se. It's not like super exciting, but you can you play out the Plate Maker on turn 4. It blocks quite well. It blocks like a 4/5, but doesn't get hit by Vanquish. That matters. You guys all know that Vanquish is a key one, and then you also have Pristine Light. That is another one that falls into a similar category. Feels like this would go really well into a Pristine Light style deck. But yeah, so you do that, and then on the next turn, if your opponent doesn't do anything or they tap out, you can go twist, go up to a 4/3, or you can like later in the game you can go all the way up to a 6/1 and then attack for 12, which is amazing. Now there's a lot of power to do that, but you just get these like really powerful like options with something along these lines. Now this is one just like very deliberately has been pushed really hard, and that makes it kind of what makes it interesting for it. Still, the twist ability on this card is just like not really what you're playing it for. It's just a durable double damage body, which pairs so well with basically anything. Any if you put a stupid Inquisitor's Blade or whatever on this, and you can kill somebody really fast. So that's exciting and that's interesting, and that's what makes this card one that stood out to me as potential. But for the most part, I just don't think that the twist mechanic has felt pushed for constructed. And then there are a few other cards I wanted to highlight that I'm just like not excited about. We have Incendiary Slagmite is the one that I have up on the screen right now. This is a 2-cost double Fire Influence 3/1. It is a Grenadin and has Onslaught. Secretly choose a card in the enemy player's market. The next time they draw a card from their market, transform the chosen card into a firebomb. Okay, this is there's a lot of reasons why I'm not crazy about this. I don't feel as if Fire has gotten a ton of Mono Fire has gotten a ton of new tools. Having double Fire Influence in the casting requirements is rough for a 2-drop like this. And like, this is a Pyre Adept is the base rates here, right? Like this is a like a Pyre Adept is not constructed playable. It's not, and the template is a little bit weird. I'm not sure whether your opponent is going to know what card has been turned into a firebomb. It does still have that axis of giving you a solution to a K card in the market, but as an aggro deck, which is something that you care about, it's just not nearly as powerful and as standard, because you can't. Like, playing this out on turn 2 is embarrassing. Like, you don't want to play this out on turn on turn 2, and it's just the stats are so bad at any point afterwards. And it's not like Pyro Adept, it's not like Pyro Adept is good on turn 2 even. So you can't just like have that argument of saying like, well, you played it on turn 2, you can play it on a later game, and it's either good early or good late. Like, no, not really. It's not good early. and late, like you have to play this on before your opponent gets to turn 3, right? Like, because if they get their super great, I don't know, sweeper or lifesteal effect that's going to, shit on you, like, you have to get the Slagmite out before then. Otherwise, it does nothing. So you'd have to play this, I think, in a really one-drop heavy fire aggro deck, and that just sounds really, really sketchy to me. And you're still going to be dead to Hailstorm, like absolutely clobbered by that if that's something that people end up playing again. So it's going to be really hard. This has a big barrier to overcome, really big barrier to overcome. Interesting note though, the art on this one is art that was used previously on a card back in closed beta. I can't remember the name of it now, but it was a unit with killer that every time it killed something, it gained the stats of the unit that it killed. And I remember at that time when they made that that they removed that from the game, I think during there was the closed beta to open beta switch. As somebody mentioned, I think that it was even Sir Rhino back when he was on the podcast, that the art was probably going to come back at some point in the future. It just took a couple of years, so we did that finally. But yeah, so I don't know. This one, some people are excited about it. I think that certain market hate cards, like this reminds me of Pony Snatcher, that people were really excited about. They thought it would totally shit on markets. It really didn't that much. It's seen very little play, and I have gotta say that Incendiary Slagmite has many of those same properties. Crashing Avalanche, this is really one that also kind of prompted me to do this. This is just one that I had a little bit of conversation with people on Twitter about. I'm still thinking about doing an article on kind of the idea behind that I was trying to propose in the conversation around this one, but it was kind of a more broad idea about knowing things and about how we test things in a card game or anywhere in life. But this is a 3-cost double Primal Influence warp card, fast spell, and it deals 4 damage to each enemy unit and site that was played this turn. Now, there are parts of this card that read really powerful, that read really strong. And I think that there's just some kind of traps in here almost. Like Warp is really good on a card like this. Fast Spell, it's really good on a card like this. The issue is that that it only hits the units that were played and sites that are played this turn, which means that you have to keep open power. If your opponent doesn't play into this, which is really easy to do if they know that you have it or have access to it, like they can draw cards, they can play an insignificant or like a merchant, like a value unit. They can play a weapon, and if they do that, then or they hold up a fast spell, like you get super punished for this. And the fact that you can't even, for example, like the old times when you'd have to hold up Death Strike for whatever reason, and you expect your opponent is going to play something good, your opponent decides not to play anything, they think that you're holding up Death Strike, they attack with their unit, and then they just pass the turn. It's like, well, in that case, you just like, well, I guess I'm going to Death Strike the thing that they have in play and kind of go on with my life. You don't have that option with this card. This card is going to just like do absolutely nothing in that scenario, and that could just punish you so badly when you're looking at something like, do I play the show's the treasure, do I strategize, do I play at a merchant, or do I hold up Crashing Avalanche? And not to mention the fact that 4 isn't like a ton either. Like you're not going to like yes, there's a good deal of 3-drops that you're going to hit with this. You're very rarely going to trade up in terms of power. Now, some people might be thinking, it's like, well, you're trading up in terms of power if you kill a site. In that case, you're trading down in terms of card advantage, though. If you like, let's say that you have something like Palace. Palace, if you hit something with a withstand, and then your opponent after you smack them for like 9, then plays Crashing Avalanche to kill your palace, you're kind of just fine, right? Like we've all had the situation where you've had Display of Impulse fired at your site. Like I guess that's the best comparison. How does this really compare to Display of Impulse's 4 damage mode? It's so much worse. How much, like, it's better against Assembly Line than any other spell that generates multiple units the same turn. Those aren't popular for right now. It's good against, I guess, Witching Hour? Really good against Witching Hour. That's one of my major part of the metagame, though. So this is clearly a rant. This is a narrow card. I don't expect it to be very good. Some people are excited about it and talking about how this makes tap out or like hard control decks much better, and I just don't think that that's the case. I don't think that this is going to see basically any play in competitive situations. It's far too narrow, and yeah, it's a weird one. But I mean, maybe I'm wrong, and people can dunk on me if I am. Like, I'm willing to do this. This is one I'll take a stand on. I just say that this card is bad, and it's not worth it. I'm not interested in playing with it. But that will do it for today. Thank you so much for joining me. This has been a really fun and interesting romp through all of it. Definitely took a little bit longer than I was expecting. I had a lot of thoughts on all of this, and generally the set looks incredibly powerful. I mean, I've kind of mentioned before that it seems as if there's a whole lot of power creep going on right now, and I would definitely say that that's kind of holds. Here, really hard to guess where the metagame is going to go from here because there's just so many powerful tools, and it's also not clear. It's not like I've seen an obvious deck that's like, oh, well, we just have all the pieces together for this thing that is definitely going to come together. It's like, no, we have like a little bit of this, a little bit of that. It'll make it a whole part of parsing what's going on here difficult. But anyway, that'll be it for me. Thank you so much for joining me. Be sure to like, subscribe, share, and comment to show support for the channel. Greatly appreciate your time. Take care, everybody.